This is a short introduction how to use GraphGIS. We will start with the database model, then I will say a few things about the GraphGIS commands, and then how to execute them in the user interface. So the database model has different layers, starting with the database on the very left, then the location, map sets, and then the maps or the data itself. The database is a normal directory on your computer, so you can just go ahead and create a new folder, call it maybe grass data or whatever you like, and define this as your GraphGIS database. Inside this database, you will have locations, which are also directories, which then contain data related to a certain geographic location or a certain project. So this is similar to a QGIS project. The difference, however, is that in a QGIS project, you can import geodata with any coordinate reference system and also from any spatial location. In GraphGIS, however, a location can only contain data with the same coordinate reference system and also within a certain geographical boundaries, because the location is defined by those two parameters. Each location contains one or several map sets, and each map set then contains the actual data that you're working with. It can contain, for example, data for a specific user, or maybe if you're working alone on your project, you might want to have different map sets for different tasks. You can only work in one map set at a time, and you can also not access the data from other map sets while you are working in a certain map set. There is, however, one special map set, and this is the permanent map set. This is automatically created when you create a new location. And this permanent map set contains information about the coordinate reference system of the location, for example. And you can also use this permanent map set to share data between map sets, because the permanent map set is accessible from all other map sets. So you might want to store base maps in there. Then you need to be careful, like never edit files within the map sets outside of GraphGIS. So do not delete files like on your Explorer. Always do this through GraphGIS, because otherwise you might corrupt the data. What you can do, however, is you can share a location with someone else. You can do this by just copying this location folder, compressing it, and sending it to someone else, and the other person can then just paste this location folder into their GRASS database. So when you start GraphGIS, you need to provide a path to your GraphGIS database. And then you can select an existing location or create a new one, and then select an existing map set or create a new map set within this location, and then click Start Grass Session to then actually get started. One more important concept in GraphGIS is the region, and the region defines the geographic extent within which data is processed. So on the right, the region is marked in red by this red rectangle. So if I apply the buffer to those streets, this buffer will only be applied within this rectangle and not outside of it. This might be handy if you want to test a new workflow, or you want to develop a new workflow and you would want to maybe in the beginning apply to a smaller area, and then once it's working you can apply to a bigger area, or you want to apply to a different area. The region can be printed and changed using this g.region command. And the region is defined by its geographical projection, which you can see from the first 4 lines here, like the ellipse, the datum, or the zone and the projection. The geographical extent defined by the northern, southern, western, and eastern boundaries, as well as the spatial resolution, like the north-southern resolution or the east-west resolution. So there are a lot of GraphGIS commands, and they are grouped in different sections. The most important ones are like the general commands. They always start with a G dot, and then, for example, the g.region, which I just shown you to change the regions, or there's a g.copy to copy data files. Vector data processing commands always start with a V, for example, the buffer around vector features, or raster commands always start with an R. Every command has a documentation. It's very similar to the one that you know from GDAL. So there's a quick or short description of the tool, along with a description of the syntax. So which parameters do you have to provide, which parameters are optional, and then some explanation for each one. How do you execute those commands? There's different ways. When you start GraphGIS, you will get like a GraphGIS command line in which you have all those GraphGIS commands available. For example, you can execute g.region -p, which will print your current region. Another way to execute those commands is through this layer manager. The layer manager window has several tabs. One of them is the console, and you have this little line here where you can also type commands, execute them, and the result will be shown in this window. The third option is to use the graphical user interface. There is a menu on top which contains one item for each geoprocessing group. So one for raster data processing contains all the commands starting with an R, or the vector data processing group, and so on. So when I, for example, open the buffer tool, v.buffer, I will get this window. In this window, I can select or set all the parameters of my tool. They're also described here on the right. And on the very bottom, you can also see what the command would look like if you execute it in the command line. If you click this copy button, this command will be copied, and then you can paste it into your script or whatever. The layer manager also has a tab called data, which shows you the data sets which are contained in your map sets. So in this case, there's the map set user1, and it contains 4 raster data sets. If you double click one of them, the dataset will be visualized in the map display window. The map display window is the third window that you will have available in GraphGIS. It's a canvas. Like you know from QGIS, you have different layers to visualize the data. The data which is shown in a map display window is also shown in the Layer Manager Layers tab. This is very similar to QGIS as well. So there's the streets layer and the aspect layer in this case. By double-clicking on them, you can style them, and you can also have several map display windows, not just one, if you want to visualize several data sets separately from each other. Okay, so this is it for a short introduction. There's of course a lot of more resources online. The documentation, which you should definitely take a look at frequently if you want to find out how to use the commands. But there's also lots of tutorials, for example, on YouTube.